Recording in progress.
Okay, good morning, and welcome everyone to today's webinar, where we will discuss the role of youth in breaking the drug cycle. My name is Isabella Araujo. I am a program officer at the Demand Reduction Unit of the Inter-American Drug Abuse Control Commission, also known by its Spanish language acronym CICAD at the Organization of American States, the OAS. Before we start, we would like to remind you that we have interpretation in Spanish and English for today's webinar. So to activate the interpretation channel, please select the globe icon at the bottom of your screen and select your preferred language. I'm going to deliver the same message in Spanish now. Antes de empezar, les quiero comentar que contamos con servicios de interpretación al inglés y al español. Para seleccionar el idioma de su preferencia, por favor, haga clic al icono del globo en la parte inferior de sus pantallas para seleccionar el idioma. Thank you for joining us today. This session is an opportunity to explore how young people are not just affected by substance use issues, but are also powerful agents of change in prevention and community resilience. We'll be hearing from inspiring speakers and discussing practical strategies to empower youth, promote healthy choices, and build stronger and drug-free communities. We're glad to have you with us, so let's get started. In our agenda for today, we have three panelists. The first one is Drusilla Reinhard Blinker. She's the director of the Loving Hands Youth Initiative Foundation in Suriname. She started her journey with us back in 2019 as a youth leader in the first Caribbean Youth Forum. And she has been doing a lot of work to empower youth across the region and the globe. She's going to be presenting today on her journey as a youth leader in drug use prevention. We also have Ms. Carmen Cavero. She's a consultant at the Demand Reduction Unit of OAS CICAD, and she's going to be presenting on youth leadership in substance use prevention. And finally, we have Mr. Nicolás Poliansky. He's the director of the International Society of Substance Use Professionals, ISSUP, the Argentina chapter, and he's going to be presenting on the role of youth, young people in breaking the drug cycle. So after the presentations today, we'll have a space for questions. So please post your questions in the comment section, and we will try to address as many as possible. Before we begin, I would like to invite Ms. Jimena Kalawski. She's the Chief of Demand Reduction Unit of OAS CICAD to open this webinar and deliver opening remarks. Jimena, welcome, and you have the floor.
Muchas gracias, Isabela. Bueno, muchas gracias a todo el equipo que está organizando, José Luis Vázquez, que está tras bambalinas, organizando este webinar. La verdad es que hemos querido retomar, estuvimos muy activos durante el periodo de la pandemia con las actividades virtuales y también pensamos que era momento de poder retomar, sobre todo con algunos temas que son muy relevantes para nosotros y para nuestra región en estos momentos. En la medida que uno va viajando y recorriendo la región de las Américas y el Caribe, nos empezamos a dar cuenta de que hay algunos aspectos que son relevantes y preocupaciones que son relevantes en estos momentos para todo el mundo. Efectivamente, el consumo de drogas es algo que se mantiene, con algunas tendencias en algunos países a aumentar, en otros a disminuir, pero también en algunos países con una gran presencia de crimen organizado, de algunas bandas que intentan involucrar a los jóvenes también, y creando toda como una cultura alrededor de la transgresión a la norma y poniendo a nuestros niños y a nuestros jóvenes en una situación de mayor vulnerabilidad. Y es por eso que quisimos partir esta serie de webinars y probablemente seguiremos abordando el trabajo con los jóvenes, qué hacer, cómo hacer, cuáles son las actividades que se están desarrollando, qué cosas podemos destacar, cómo podemos compartir esfuerzos, cómo podemos construir una red de apoyo entre todos los países para cuidar esto que preciamos tanto, que no solo es la paz, la tranquilidad, sino que también a nuestros jóvenes para que puedan tener un, un buen y mejor desarrollo. Así que muchas gracias a los expertos que nos van a acompañar el día de hoy y a Drusilla, que además ha hecho todo un trabajo en relación con el liderazgo y nos ha acompañado ya hace algún tiempo y es realmente un orgullo para nosotros verla en distintos foros y además en un rol tan activo. Así que muchísimas gracias. Vamos a tener, espero, un muy webinar en esta ocasión y ojalá podamos tener tiempo también para intercambiar preguntas y comentarios. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Jimena, for your remarks. I would like to now invite Ms. Drusilla Reinhard Blinker to deliver her presentation. Drusilla, welcome, and you have the floor.
Yes, thank you very much for the introduction. I'm going to share my screen now. Let's. Yes. So, I hope you can all see my screen. Can I get a confirmation? Yes? Great. Okay, so yes, I really want to thank you guys, the OAS for the opportunity to be able to contribute here. I'm always ready. Isabella knows every time they ask, I'm always ready to contribute. And yeah, so my presentation today is titled My Journey. It's been, I'm 25 years old, so it's not been a very long one, but it's been a very interesting one. And I am so excited to share this with you guys today. So, as stated, I am the director of Loving Hands Foundation in Suriname. Uh, uh, I'm also the current SDG Youth Ambassador. And yeah, so those are two of my titles, but that's not who I am as a person. So, who am I? I want to share, I think, the next slide. I'm having a small issue. Okay. Yeah. So, who am I? I am a young person. I was born in the year 1999 on the 12th of December. And usually when we talk about our journey, we like to start at a point in time where, we started something specific. But as people, we need to remember that our journey starts the moment we are born. Everything that is put towards your growth, your communication, that's something that starts like from the very beginning. And I am so appreciative of everything that was, you know, put inside of me from the very beginning, and that has made me into the person that I am today. But if we take a look at my journey as a prevention influencer or youth leader, I started out at around the age of, I think, 11, because yeah, my mom started a foundation, and I was there. I was able to see everything firsthand, and in 2013 I was able to start out as a peer educator. And then my international experience started at the First Caribbean Youth Forum, as was stated. And that was something that really catapulted me into, youth leadership as I know it today, because the experience and all of the knowledge that was shared during this youth forum was amazing. And that has led me to be able to represent my country in various settings in various countries. And I am so very grateful for that opportunity. And yeah, so that's just a little bit of who I am and what I've been doing. And yeah, so I wanted to share my journey based on, let's say, on motherhood, because everyone who knows me knows that that is a very huge part of me. I always state in every presentation that being a mother is my most important job. I have so many roles, so many things that I do, but being a mother is always the most important job. So on November 6th in 2021, I gave birth to a healthy baby boy. So you guys can see him here, full of life, always happy. And very painful experience, very painful, but it brought me so much joy. And I want to share a little bit with you the things that people tell you before you become a mother, but also a little bit of what they do not tell you. So, the brain definitely adapts to be able to nurture and protect. You have structural brain changes, and then you have, it's reduced gray matter. And that helps you to be able to be more efficient in caregiving. So you have the affected brain areas that are the prefrontal cortex, the amygdala, the hypothalamus, and the reward system. And it all helps you with being able to nurture and, take care of your child. But sometimes people tell you, oh my gosh, you're gonna lose so much sleep, or you're gonna be so much heavy. It's so rewarding. And it's all true. But one thing that I discovered that they never tell you is how scary the world becomes after you experience motherhood. Like you see the danger in every little thing. You see the danger in a chair being placed wrong. You see the danger in a door being open. And to me, that was something that has stuck with me for a very long time, because it's something that I did not expect to happen in this instant. It was just something that happened very quickly. And I want to share with you later in my presentation how that relates for me to prevention. So, motherhood or leadership. So as I stated, in 2021, I gave birth to my son. And in 2022, I think my son was around like 5 to 6 months. And I got a message, "Hi, Drew. I hope you're doing okay. There's going to be a global youth forum, and we would like to have you there as one of the co-facilitators." And I don't know, my heart just skipped a beat because I was a new mother. My son was attached to me from the moment he was born. So having this amazing opportunity, and also having this fear of, you know, being away from your child, it was crazy. I shared it with the people around me, and they were like, "We do think that you should take this opportunity." And like after a while, I was like, you know what? It's gonna be difficult, but I'm gonna do it. And I did it. And the people who were there, no, I cried so much during this trip. It was one of the hardest things I did. It was amazing, the experience that I got, the people that I met, it was just amazing. But I cried so much, like every single day, because it was so hard for me to be away from my child. But having taken that opportunity for me gave me an insight that you do not have to choose between motherhood or leadership. You're able to do both. And that has given me, the courage to be able to take more opportunities, because after that, I was able to, in my country, but also internationally, join different meetings, different forums. So I am one of the people that is able to share with other young people, especially, that you do not have to choose between motherhood or leadership or any professional job. You can do prevention and do motherhood at the same time, especially as a young person. So, how have I been maneuvering all of this? I have some strict things that I make sure that I follow, and that's establishing clear boundaries, making sure that, when it's professional responsibilities, when it's family time, making sure that you have clear boundaries to prevent burnout and all of that. And also prioritizing what truly matters, it's important that you know what your core goals are as a mother, but also as a leader, and make sure that you let go of non-essential and delegate where it's possible to maximize impact. I'm someone, I love to do things a certain way, so it was very difficult for me to delegate. But now I have to make sure that the stuff that I cannot do, I delegate to other people. Cultivate a reliable support system, which I do have. That's one of the very important things. If I do need to leave to do something, I don't have to worry about if my son is taken care of or not. He is taken care of, and that's something that I do appreciate. Invest in your well-being, very important, and lead with flexibility, not perfection. So let's look at understanding prevention through the lens of motherhood. I explained that the world it turned scary in this instant, because when you, as a person, you just live your life for you see it through your lens. But the moment that you experience motherhood, you start experiencing everything through what your child needs. So I think one way that I'm able to explain this, I think it was last year, me, my sister-in-law, and my son, we were in a car, and we were heading to the doctor's office because my sister-in-law had to go to an appointment. She was pregnant at the time, so I like to support her in any way possible. And while we were crossing one of the roads, I could see a car heading towards us in a very high speed. And in the movies, when they show certain things and it suddenly like happens in slow motion, that's exactly how it happened. I saw this car heading towards us, and it was like everything went into slow motion. And yeah, we were hit by the car. And like my son was in the back seat, my sister-in-law and I were in the front. And the car impacted directly where my son was sitting in the back. So the car was spinning around, and while that was happening, all I could do, I was trying so hard to turn back to be able to reach my son, and I felt so helpless in that moment because I couldn't. He was right there, but I could not reach him. And that has gotten me to think about people who deal with substance use disorders. They have family members, they have friends, they're there. And, as a family member, when you see your loved one going through something like that, when you see them struggling, you try to reach them, you try to help them as much as possible. And sometimes, even though they're right there, you're not able to reach them, and it makes you feel helpless. You don't know what to do, you don't know how to help. And I feel like that experience has fueled me to give my efforts more when it comes to prevention, because it has helped me see like what people go through when it comes to trying to help their loved ones when it comes to substance use prevention, and especially when it comes to young people, because it's this person with so much potential, with so much that they could reach, but due to dealing with this disorder, their life is limited to dealing with this problem. So yeah, we were all okay. We are okay. We're healthy. We're happy, and that was just one comparison that I wanted to make for you guys to show you how I've been viewing prevention ever since that experience. So we as people, we always talk about how important youth leadership is, and why youth engagement is important in prevention efforts, but I still want to highlight certain things. Why does youth leadership matter in substance use prevention? So peer influence is powerful. We know that. I've experienced that, like not just me, because usually people approach me and they're like, my God, you're doing such a great job. But the things that I've seen my peers do, it's amazing. Young people are more likely to listen to and emulate their peers. When youth lead prevention efforts, they make messages more relatable and credible, shift social norms within their peer groups, serve as positive role models, and they reduce the appeal of risky behavior. Also, young people bring fresh insight and innovation, so they understand the evolving culture. There's always something changing, and making sure that you use these young people helps you actually reach the target group at the time that you need to. So language and pressure that the generation faces is also something very important. So it ensures that more relevant and engaging prevention strategies are created, greater outreach through youth-centered platforms, and a sense of ownership and empowerment, increasing program impact. So I think this was a little bit it. I spoke more on my journey as a mother, and prevention influencer. But something that I want to leave you with today is you don't have to be perfect to lead. You just have to be present. And that is in both instances when it comes to motherhood, but also as a youth leader. I sometimes, when I'm so tired after working the whole day, I lay in my room and my son is probably watching TV, and he'll come to the room. He'll be like, Mommy, can you please come? And I'm like, he probably needs something. And then when I get up, he's like, sit. And I'm like, you called me out of my room just to tell me to sit. And then he'll pay me no mind, and he'll just mind his business, keep watching TV. But the fact that I'm there, that's all he wanted. So when it comes to motherhood, but also to being a youth leader, just a leader in general, don't feel like you this message is not for you. But as a leader, you just need to be present. I think that's a very, very important step into making a change and making a positive impact. And yeah, that is what I wanted to leave you with. I thank you guys so very much for having me, and I look forward to any questions that you have later on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Drew, for such a wonderful presentation. Very touching. We're very, very proud of you for everything that you do as a mother, as a youth leader, as an agent of change, not only in your community, but also in the region and across the world. So Drusilla is really an inspiration for us. And she's been working so hard ever since, at least ever since I met her. And as she mentioned, she's been an influencer since she was 11. So your journey is really, really long. You said it was short, but it's quite long. So thank you again. We would like to now invite the next panelist, Ms. Carmen Cavero. She's a consultant for the Demand Reduction Unit of CICAD, and she's going to be presenting on youth leadership and substance use prevention. Carmen, good morning. Welcome, and you have the floor.
Muchas gracias. Muchas gracias. Buenos días con todos.
Thank you very much, everyone. Welcome to this webinar. Thank you to OAS, and thank you to everyone that has joined this session to listen to these presentations.
¿Se está compartiendo la pantalla? Disculpe.
Can you see my screen?
Sí, solo que si la puede poner en modo presentación.
Yes, we see the screen, but can you hit the presentation mode button? That would be great.
Perdón, un minuto. ¿Comparto toda la pantalla o está bien así?
Is that better or?
¿La pueden ver?
Sí, la podemos ver, pero todavía no está en el modo presentación.
Yeah, we can see it, but still not in presentation mode.
Ahora sí. Muchas gracias.
Okay, there it is. Perfect.
Es un gusto, un placer estar.
Thank you very much once again. It's a pleasure to share this presentation with you today. I'm also very honored to follow Drusilla's presentation. It's a great setting the floor for what we're going to talk about. I loved the description of your trajectory, Drusilla. Thank you so much for sharing. I would like to do the same, but it would take so much more time. So let's talk about this presentation. I am a person that is very committed, and I am sure that youth leadership in substance abuse prevention is a very effective tool. So let's carry on. We've seen in recent years that in Latin America, the participation of adolescents and young people is not only a recommended practice, but it is a practice that has significantly contributed to the results of programs and evidence-based initiatives. So we have studies and evaluations that have demonstrated that. And today I will share with you one of the evidence-based interventions that show how the work with youth provides a different incentive to the proposal of an intervention. There are some considerations to take into account when we work with youth. This comes from the evidence, the interventions, and the results that have been part of assessment efforts in the region that say that substance use prevention programs achieve better results when they focus on younger age groups and also when we work with vulnerable populations. For example, if we've seen interventions with children that live in the streets, it is very interesting to start working with them with schools or with other spaces where we find these kids as well. Life skills programs such as Life Adventure program, among others, tend to be much more efficient when adolescents and young people are involved. We see that in schools interventions. We will talk about that in a little bit, how school is a strategic space. It's a space for prevention. And school as well, it's a space where we have our student population already there. But it's not only that. When we work with schools, we are working with a whole community. We're working with families, we're working with authorities, and with all of those other stakeholders that are important agents for change to work on prevention. Another aspect is that early onset of alcohol use is a risk factor for developing maladaptive patterns of use in adulthood. That is something that has been demonstrated. We have seen that after 40, 50 years of age, we've seen other problems basically on personality due to early use of alcohol. And the combined or simultaneous use of drugs, tobacco, and alcohol, for example, among young people can increase the risk of developing drug abuse or dependence. And adolescents and young people are more likely to improve their behaviors and attitudes if they receive health information from their peers. This is something that Drusilla alluded as well, and how important peer work is as a strategy that can be used in prevention in general. And it has provided very good results, specifically on drug abuse prevention and also prevention related to sexuality and sex education. This is one of the community coalitions that I had the privilege of working with. This community coalitions is a proposal that CADCA from the US developed, and this is a proposal that has been implemented in various countries in the region. And it is a very important intervention because basically the work of the coalition is to develop their program inside the community at the very grassroots local level. There are other proposals that can be worked on at different levels, but this one in particular aims for a community that can own their own needs and wants, and this is how CADCA works with community coalitions. These are a collaboration effort because the most important thing for this type of coalitions is the other person that is next to you, your neighbor. And this is how communities start a conversation, and in that conversation, they find or maintain their identity and they fight for a specific goal. And what is that goal? Well, the goal is to create a healthy community, a safe, healthy, and drug-free community. Because we know that when consumption problems exist, that is connected to other type of problems, crime, gangs-related problems, and other psychosocial aspects in communities as well. The CADCA model has three areas. The first one, which is the core of the model, is the strategic planning. And in that organization, they have 12 sectors, let's say. So they find the churches, the schools, government agencies like health and education, and stores, and there are other civil society organizations involved, as well as other stakeholders that create these 12 sectors. Strategic planning then starts from the community. And the first step is to carry out a diagnosis. After that, once the most important needs have been identified, During this whole process, young adults and adolescents are involved in this whole process. Then there's a training phase. There's then the intervention, and then there's an assessment period, which is cyclical. Therefore, after this planning phase, they can improve every intervention iteratively. And after that, they can have comprehensive strategies at the individual and group level. So that's where policies are also proposed. There are some improvements in capacity building interventions, as well as information that may be offered as tools for work, particularly on prevention. What do coalitions do when an intervention is carried out in a correct way, in a synergy process? Well, when we work with coalitions, which is something that I will talk about later on, one of the aspects of working with coalitions is that in our model, the participation of young people was very relevant, particularly as leaders throughout the whole process and the whole implementation phase. Coalitions aim to impact or have an impact on the community, and the role of young people is critical because they become an change agent, which is very valid for all of the other activities. So the first thing that we do, of course, is to identify the problems, which is, in this case, drug consumption. So we need to understand what drug are we going to try to prevent consumption for? Who is going to be involved? What are the strategies to do these changes? And what we can or aim to do, coming from this type of work that is done in a lengthy process, really, is to reduce consumption at the level of the community. In Peru, the coalition promoted youth leadership, and that was a hallmark of this model in Peru. When we started working, we were not necessarily thinking too much about young people. So we realized, what can we do to involve young people? Because this was not only a moment in which we were providing technical assistance, there was a cry from the community to have their youth involved. And we were able to make this work more sustainable due to the fact that various stakeholders were committed, such as government agencies and young people as well. And it was the youth who created political advocacy policies because they were the ones communicating with the authorities together with some adults, that they were able to generate some policies and some elements and interventions that allow for coalitions to be sustainable throughout time. So this coalition program promoted a model of coalitions with youth leadership. And the results were the following. The coalition became safe spaces where young people found their voice and were heard. For example, one of the actions that they could develop to create safe spaces for entertainment or physical activities is to have some parks available for this type of activities. And therefore, several spaces were identified and were turned into parks so that young people could use those for sporting activities, for example. And in some places, we found that this was not very strategic because those spaces in certain areas became spaces for consumption. So therefore, the importance to have young people involved from the very beginning of the design, because they are the ones who will tell us what do they like to do, what is the best way for participation. So in this case, they felt heard. They felt that this was a space where they had a voice. The commitment of members and youth leadership were essential for the effective planning and implementation of the model for change. So these communities were organized, and by means of meetings, they would create their model for change. And this model for change is the equivalent of a work plan, but with much more detail. And they were critically involved by means of their proposals. Many of them participated individually, and some others participated via youth groups. The knock-on-door strategy, which is part of the coalition's strategy, proved to be effective and significantly increased youth participation in the initiative. So when we started mapping these areas of the community and reaching every neighbor in the community to tell them what the coalition was aiming to do, which was created in various areas of Lima, people were listening, but there was also a push for young people to be motivated to participate, and that is how we were able to find more young people involved. Young people would also participate in awareness creation or awareness raising. So they had an active participation in activities for awareness raising. For example, in implementing strategies where stores, for example, would be told to not sell alcohol to underage children or things in this area. They were having this type of conversations with shop owners. They would show them the norm. They would show and paste those norms in a visible area so that the community would know about this as well. This is where a youth commission was created, and they wanted that to be part of it. They wanted to have a commission for youth. They would be in charge of the communication, social media channels, the work on site, and young coalition members played a leading role in advocacy actions with policymakers. They were the ones who were writing their letters and sending their proposals. And thanks to that, they were actually listened to by many authorities in the country, and they were able to participate in the participatory budget. The participatory budget is an intervention that a municipality develops so that citizens and organizations can present their projects that can be sustainable and that can be also funded based on an assessment. Therefore, teenagers, in this case, based on the work that they did, they were able to participate in this participatory budget. And they had a couple of proposals. And one of these was Dance of Hope. And this project, Dance of Hope, was allocated a budget thanks to the participation. This is one of the other experiences that was very valuable, which was the Andean Youth Initiative. This was a proposal created by them, in Ecuador, Bolivia, Colombia, and Peru. This is an initiative developed by UNODC in 2018. And as part of the strategies of this project was IJA, which is the Andean Youth Initiative. I would like to briefly talk about how to handle this at the interior of the project. We realized that this was a very big project, and we had many instances where the participation of young people was there. So that's why this initiative wanted to gather young people from various organizations and even young individuals that were interested in participating. And this is how they created a sort of councils, youth councils, and each country had their own. And then we organized a big meeting where each of the councils would present a drug prevention strategy with youth interventions and participation. So we heard so many proposals, and a few of them were winners, and then they were selected to go to Cartagena, where delegations from various countries participated as well. And in that meeting, they were able to present their proposals, compare with other proposals from other countries, and this is how the Andean Youth Initiative came about, where they were, by means of their participation, propose certain activities. They created an implementation program for IJA. Carmen, we just have 2 minutes left, just to let you know. Okay, so let me finish with this one. There was another piece of this initiative, which was digital training and empowerment. So a community manager was hired and involved, and all of the information from the social media channels would go through a filter where prevention specialists would analyze that information before it went out, and they validated all of this data, and it was used by all of the participating countries. This is how we were able to strengthen youth leadership in the Andean region. And something that was very, very valuable was the creation of an Andean prevention network. Thank you very much for listening to this presentation. This is everything that I wanted to share with you. I hope that this was useful for everyone. And of course, if there are comments or questions, happy to receive them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carmen, for sharing all of these amazing initiatives that you have been involved with. That really highlights how important it is to include youth, not only in the planning but also in the execution of the drug use prevention initiatives. We have had the opportunity to work with some of the youth from the CADCA coalitions, for example, and we have been able to see how important it is that we continue to build their leadership so that they can make a change in their communities. Before I invite the next guest, I would like to remind all attendees that we can use the chat, the chat box to type in your questions for the panelists. And after the final presentation today, we will read the questions for the panelists. So now I would like to invite Mr. Nicolás Poliansky. He's the director of the International Society of Substance Use Professionals, also known as ISSUP, the Argentinian chapter. And he's going to be presenting on the role of young people in breaking the drug cycle. Nicolás, good morning and welcome.
Hola a todos y todas.
Hello, everyone. It is a pleasure to be here with you all today. I would like to show my appreciation to OAS CICAD for the invitation. Thank you, Jimena. Thank you, José Luis and Isabella, for sharing this space. And I celebrate the intergenerational exchange. I think that Drusilla's presentation was extremely enriching. And I will try to frame now my presentation in an intergenerational point of view. And thank you very much as well, Carmen, for sharing your presentation and experiences. And it was very interesting to learn what is happening in the region. Okay, so I'll start my presentation now.
Bueno. Me quedé pensando en el inicio, yo le puse un subtítulo a mi presentación que es Juventud.
The subtitle of my presentation is Youth, Cultures, and Complexities, which is an important piece for breaking the cycle of drug use. And I like the word cycle, but I think I like the word circuit much more, because a circuit can have different shapes. And I might go from the starting point again, but I can take different routes. So how do we break a circuit that we see with youth so that we can build a possible path for a life trajectory of these young people? So the drug problem, which is a tremendously complex problem, needs to be understood from that lens of complexity. That is why I will introduce some of these aspects. And there's a cultural aspect to the complexity. Even though the world is globalized and the influence of, for example, young influencers is massive and global, there are some structural situations like poverty and psychosocial problems that create subcultures and microcultures that those who work in prevention need to focus on so that we can understand those cultural expressions, because they involve different complexities that we need to address so that we can actually break the circuit and try to transform it into a possible path. So I think that that's a fundamental concept that I would like to start this presentation with. And another very important point in my mind is that the connecting lines between childhood, adolescence, and youth, because you become a young person in the way that you moved across your adolescence and you moved across your childhood. So that's a connecting line that has a lot of complexities at play. The way that you transit your childhood in terms of complexities, which include where a child is born, how were they brought up, what type of neurobiological development they had, what type of education they were able to receive, and if they had trauma that they had lived in their childhood. All of that are conditions that will have, one way or another, an impact in the way that they move across their adolescence. And usually the onset age for alcohol and tobacco is an age that is coming down, and the adolescence being a stage of experimentation will lead for experimentation with drugs and alcohol for many adolescents, and that is going to create some deterministic aspects that will determine how they transit their youth years. So just wanted to lay the ground with that before the presentation. I like to start with that idea to transmit the idea of complexity in a curious way. Let's say that there's a complexity that we have between the communication that we have. For example, here it says, between what I think, what I want to say, what I think I said, what I actually say, what you want to hear, what you actually hear, what you think you understood, what you want to understood, and what you actually understand, there are 9 possibilities of misunderstanding. So this is a phrase that establishes 9 possibilities that at the level of communication there could be a disconnect. So when we talk about the complexities of alcohol and drugs consumption, we need to understand that it is indeed a complex issue. You all have seen this image, the biosocial, spiritual, and psychological areas of life. This is a shared experience for humans. Under the skin, we are almost exactly the same. The differences come from what's on the skin outward. For example, the color of the skin, the places where you were born. There are other conditioning aspects, perhaps your religious beliefs coming from your family, of upbringing, that would have other differences added to the mix. And then your childhood, your adolescence, and based on all of that, your psychological development will start to form. The white dot in the middle is a singularity that we all have. So how all of those aspects combine in our own personal history, which is unique and cannot be repeated. And I think that this is a very valuable image to understand the complexity that each of us have at a subjective level and what the implications are to relate with other people and what the complexities are as well of what can happen in groups. So understanding all of these complexities, the use of alcohol and drugs is something that comes to complexify all of this a little bit more. Throughout history, there are many ways in which humans have consumed psychoactive substances. What has changed is the social framework in which that occurs. And that contextual framework in the modern world, there are many categories that are moving and that are generated new definitions in which people from my generation, which are a little bit far away from what's happening with young people, and that's where the intergenerational aspect comes into play. We see the use of alcohol and drugs from the very adolescence, which is determined by all of this complexity I mentioned. The use of psychoactive substances is going to impact these 4 spheres. Okay, so in this complexity, we have now identified a new element that we all know that has to do with technology. And recently I just found a paper that instead of called TICs, Information Technologies and Communication, these Spanish colleagues, they add the R, which is a relational factor. And I think that was brilliant, because this was actually so visible that we were probably not even considering it. Because now we have information technologies and relational technologies. These are all relational technologies. So added to the complexities that we already had as human beings, we add the complexity of the use of internet, social media, and the problematic use of screens from the very early age. And why do I add that? Well, because even though there is a very important aspect of modifications coming from these substances at the level of the brain, there is scientific evidence that says that the excessive use of screens in childhood has impact on neurodevelopment. So, coming back to what I was saying before, we have children that have this impact in their neurodevelopment that will reach adolescence with an impulsivity that is a little greater, perhaps because of that use, and they will be much more predisposed to the use earlier use of drugs and perhaps even more compulsive use of substances. So we can see how this frame becomes more complex, right? So these are all of the questions that I think that I have around the relationship between technologies and information alongside all of the other areas of our life, which are amazing tools, but we need to understand how do we connect, how do we transform these tools into something that can be much more beneficial. Because the use of screens amplifies exponentially all of the mental health, cyberbullying, consumption abuse of young people. So it's a big amplifier. So this complex combination of factors with alcohol, drugs, and technologies is an amplifier of this malaise. And we cannot understand this complexity without understanding as well that we are going through very complex moments in the world. And this has reduced the level of global well-being. And the quality of life as a collective factor has also been reduced. And even what we are looking into right now, empathy, has gone down. So I believe that the level of well-being has gone down. There are more difficulties around quality of life, particularly in Latin America, around the lack of work and the type of work, and young people with less opportunity to get into the job market. And there is also negative influences in technology where the only value to achieve quickly based on certain information that you see online is just to get rich quick in a way. So in order to transit this type of lack of well-being, alcohol and substances and online gambling is something that starts to have a greater prevalence in our young people. So this is a very big challenge to understand how can we use technologies as a protection factor. And a bigger question for me is AI, right? How much is AI going to impact in the creation of social relationships? The use of AI. How is all of this complexity we already live in is going to interact with an artificial intelligence? How will it be regulated from a bioethical point of view? Whatever it is, there are some aspects related to the consumption of use, sexuality, and young people are tending to ask these questions to artificial intelligence. So, and the AI provides answers. So what happens, which is something that we already see when we have children with mental health situations and with vulnerable conditions go into AI to find answers. So I agree with what Drusilla was saying in terms of peer-to-peer collaboration, which is a very, very important piece. Because now when you're all isolated and we have our own screen and our own conversation with ChatGPT, that is something that can have also an impact on the use and consumption of psychoactive substances, which makes this whole framework much more complex. So I just wanted to share all of these concerns of mine because I believe that they are also connected to our experiences coming from early age. And all of those who have access to the internet and to all of the information there need to also understand what the implications are. So I'm a little bit of a nerd, and I love this concept of polydispersion that comes from physics. So what it currently proliferates is a great amount of information. So polydispersion is this concept of dots with different sizes and appears like that, just like that. And it's very difficult to find the differences, for example, between real, true information and misinformation. And this is information that changes beliefs and understanding of the world around their own personality, sexuality, consumption of drugs and alcohol. And adults, we know that we are not references for young people. That's why the intergenerational dialogue, I believe, is important. And there are some vectors in this way that are uniting the dispersion of this information that appears basically, let's say, on the internet and social media. So I am wondering how many young people ask AI about different types of consumption, of how to prepare a substance, for example. And we know that polysubstances are also a problem, because with synthetic drugs, a modification of the molecule, it creates a new substance, and they are ever more easier to create. So that comes back to the bioethical considerations of the regulation of AI. And in the best of cases, we can reach the level of experience. So how do we establish this bridge between these frameworks from the complexity point of view, dealing with a complex issue like drugs, like information technologies? In Argentina, we see that on average, 8 to 9-year-olds have access to their first cell phone. So all of these are concerns that I want to put on the table, because I think that we need to start thinking about that, because we should not leave the thinking to the AI. These are just categories that are in motion, and we don't really know where they are going. And the purpose of sharing this with you all is that certain formats of technologies aim to provide linear responses to complex issues, and reality is much more complex than a linear response that we can get from any AI or from any influencer that can provide a comment or a video on YouTube or a Twitter or X message. It is transmitted as an unquestioned truth in many ways. So I know that we're short on time, but there's this issue of information, knowledge, and experience to understand what all of this means for the development of young people. In this way, I celebrate the youth forum, and I hope that it would be a great practice to add intergenerational factors in this youth forum. Nicolás, just to let you know, we have 2 minutes left. Okay, I will try to be as quick as possible. I wanted to share many figures with you, but let's leave it at this idea. From the adolescence, men and women have gone through several crises, and those crises can be a facilitator to or enabler for the early consumption of drugs and alcohol. These are times of crisis where the start of sexuality is there, where there are the first heartbreaks and emotional crises start. There are some additional situational types of crisis. Drusilla was talking about that accident in a car, right? And in Argentina, for example, 16-year-olds are allowed to drive, and if they have consumed alcohol, they can have a very, very serious accident. These are two generators of crisis. And of course, the crisis of development and adolescence. These are all different types of crises around development and neurobiological development. These are very difficult moments to live. And the one that I'm most interested in are existential crises, which is something that is very hard right now with youth. It's to talk about a life project based on the education. So this existential crisis is something that does not allow them to dream around a possible future. And that is just an added problem, because if I don't have it now, I will not have it ever. And if I'm not going to have my dream ever, then why live? And we know that in adolescence, the second most prevalent cause of death is suicide. So that's an important thing to consider as well. So, as I was saying, technology is a big catalyzed agent of these problems, and suicidal ideation being part of this part. So, I still have a lot to share. I know that my time is up, so thank you very much for your attention. I'll give it back to Isabella.
Thank you very much, Nicolás, for this excellent presentation. We wish we had more time so you could go a little bit deeper as you planned. But we now need to open the floor for the questions. And I can see here that in the Q&A box, we have received a few questions from the participants, which I'm going to read. And you can please feel free to answer the questions, or if the question is directly addressed to you, I will let you know. So, empezaré en español porque veo una pregunta.
I'll start in Spanish because this is a question for Carmen from Alejandro Marin that says, in the work of these coalitions, how do you guarantee that the alcohol and tobacco industry that want to position their products with that population don't interfere in the design of the strategies?
Bueno, ¿puedo pasar a dar la respuesta, Isabella?
Can I answer that question now, Isabella? Yeah, yes, please. Okay, so I think these are related questions, actually, to the alcohol and tobacco industries. The question is about design. But we know that when we are designing evidence-based strategies, the first thing to do is to carry out a diagnosis. And as part of this diagnosis, we not only identify the problems, but also what are the conditions that would make the implementation favorable. And municipalities are a big factor of help. And that is where the advocacy work needs to happen. For example, something that I wanted to say is that in these areas where we were working, these are peri-urban areas. So these alcohol companies, what they would do is they would go to beer companies and they would close a whole area. They would provide access to the community for the sale of alcohol and beer and all of that. So what did we do? Regarding that, we created a campaign with the community. We spoke with the authorities, and those situations started to diminish and reduce. And it not only was reduced, it was actually completely dismantled. And that was a valid strategy at the time. But we all know that these industries are very complex and powerful. But we need to focus on awareness creation with young people, particularly. Nico was explaining that. And this is an articulated effort between young people, authorities, institutions, and government agencies. So I think that it is indeed a complex issue, but it's not impossible.
Muchas gracias, Carmen. Paso para la siguiente pregunta.
Thank you very much, Carmen. Going on to the next question from Gloria Salinas.
Muy buenos días, les saludo desde El Salvador.
Good morning
Agradezco
from
el
El
espacio de
Salvador.
aprendizaje.
Thank you very much for
Por favor,
this
quisiera
space.
desafiarla
I would like
respecto a la
to
prevención dirigida
ask
local,
about
ya que la evidencia nos indica que la
peer-directed
prevención e implementación
prevention,
dirigida por pares frente
because we know that this type of prevention led by
a las personas
peers
adultas capacitadas para este propósito es débil.
compared to adult-led interventions have different results. And Ms. Carmen Cavero was talking about this, particularly around the willingness of young people to have a better connection with their peers and access. Okay, so this is a question for me as well. I see Nico that's also smiling, and Drusilla, if you'd like as well to comment, that would be great. So, of course, we don't have at all times professionals that may be trained to provide technical assistance or accompany all of the peer-led processes. So we need to be clear that the peer strategy is effective. It has been validated, but it also matters how you implement it. For a young person to provide information to their peer, they need to previously be aware, but also trained. They need to have objective information and education. And this goes hand in hand with adults. We can have other strategies there, for example, mentorships or promoters is something that is very common in the health care setting. And we were talking about the importance of this type of reference. A reference of another young person is really important. They are going to listen more to a young person because of language, simple language, and be friendlier. What Nico was saying about empathy, how many of our services that have been implemented in our countries meet the conditions for young people to actually participate? That's a fair question. So it's important to reflect on that. So yeah, Gloria, thank you for that comment and question. It is great to have you here. And I agree that we need to be working together. We need to have a promoter or a mentor, whatever you want to call them, accompanying the peer-to-peer, but always together with a prepared adult based on their capacities as well. If I may add to that response, the work with peers is fundamental. It is very important to have training as well. When we work with young people and adolescents, we do it in community spaces and in the identification of positive leaders, because we know that there are some negative leaders around. And there are some studies that provide evidence about this, that the most credible source for an adolescent is another adolescent. So this is a valuable point that needs to be borne in mind so that we can continue working on training and communication. However, how to build this type of peer-led leadership in a way that is also cross-cutting, so that is not necessarily horizontal, but also hierarchical. And that's another challenge, I think, that needs to be added to the type of work that we do with peers. It's not only about the knowledge that you can achieve to get, but the way that this knowledge is going to be shared with their peer as well.
Muchas gracias, Carmen y Nicolás.
Thank you very much, Carmen and Nicolás, for those responses. This is a very important point. And this is something that we have been working as well to train and help young people to contribute in a much more effective way so that they can work on an evidence-based program. So they need to be trained, the adults they work with need to be trained as well. So this is a common effort that is required to educate and train in youth in all of the cycles of prevention, all the way from planning, implementation, and evaluation. So this is a very, very important point. Okay, next question. Jonathan asks, how do we empower young people with decisions of adults that may put them in danger? In Mexico, we have a big problem with narco culture, for example. I don't know if Nico, Drew, or Carmen would like to comment. Well, thank you for that question. That is part of the complexity that I was talking about. I always think about those who are outside of the system, right? Because when we talk about youth and adolescents, those who reach youth that is functional have less risks than those who have had other types of situations in their childhood. And adolescents that have had a structural problem related to this issue are the ones that is harder to reach. So those who are outside of the statistic are the ones that are harder to find and to reach. The studies usually just include the people or the young people that are in schools. So we don't have a very trustworthy data of those who are not in school because there's a structural poverty as well. So the big challenge here is the work that we have with communities, the work that we do with each of the reference of these communities. And the hardest thing to do is to have something to offer in exchange, because usually we don't have anything to offer in vulnerable communities. So how to break the cycle of 4 generations in a very marginal context? So they would ask, why would I go to school if I do that, if I work as a soldier for this crime group, I earn more money than if I went to school. So those challenges are very, very big. We need to offer something in exchange, right? There needs to be a political decision as well. And that is a very big challenge in the region, because in the Latin American region, there are many families that are 3 or 4 structural, 3 or 4 generations that have had this structural vulnerability. Thank you very much, Nicolás. Okay, for those that are asking in the chat whether these presentations will be shared, my colleague José Luis Vázquez has already shared them in the chat. You can download them directly. There is one more question, and this is for Nicolás from Dr. Raúl Nevada. who is the director of the Addiction and Mental Health Institute in the state of Mexico. Very interesting presentation by Nicolás, understanding this as a circuit and not as a cycle. How did you think of generating a cultural change that uses better technologies or that can counteract against the negative effects? Well, Raul, if I had the answer to that question, I would be a much happier man. It's a great question. That's a whole field of research to be explored. I think that working with adolescents and youth is something that needs to be worked together. And the first thing that we need to do is to dare to think about this at that level of complexity, because when we talk about drugs, we aim necessarily towards the problem of substances only, but we don't think necessarily about the causes that lead young people to have their first experiences with alcohol and drugs. And we think as well that it is hard to think how this is related to technology. So coming from the big tech companies, I always try to talk about these issues. The technology companies are companies, and we need to try to advocate that every time that someone touches a screen, they are making money out of that. So we need to start thinking about that, how to put that in the agenda of digital education that end up being part of a comprehensive education plan. In 2015, WHO was talking about the use of devices as a public health problem. And private companies such as the ones that work in alcohol, tobacco, or online gambling, they have more and better presence in social media with better neuromarketing studies so that adolescents, men and women, can tap, buy, and have a compulsive purchasing effects on the internet. So all of that is aligned. I know that there are many initiatives involved in CICAD to talk about this in social media, but there's so much more to do. And in a private company such as social media is something that we need to start talking about and put in the agenda first. Thank you very much, Nicolás, for that. Okay, final question. We are close to the wrap-up of today's session.
I will read the question. I believe you would be able to answer. So I have a question from Mr. Colin James. He's a counselor and chargé d'affaires at the Embassy of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago in Brussels. And he's asking, are there considered efforts to ensure that fixed percentages of national budgets are allocated to drug use prevention programs?
Sí, muchas gracias por la pregunta.
Thank you very much for that question. I mean, we would love for that to be the case. If there was an amount in the budget by law that had to be allocated for this purpose. But in OAS, we have CICAD as the political arm where we talk about drugs. And member states are the ones who establish this type of plan of action. And in this plan of action, they talk about what the objectives are for a commitment, 5 years, renewable, and for that, of course, resources are needed. However, based on the efforts that can be done by means of legislation, there is really no norm that can force people to develop a plan based on an allocated budget. However,
la OEA y a través de la participación de los Estados miembros,
in OAS and
en la
based
CICAD,
on
ellos mismos establecen actividades y objetivos a lograr.
activities that every
Parte de eso, por
state
supuesto, que tiene
can
que ver con
create.
mejorar el
That's
apoyo,
how
el
the budget is
financiamiento,
usually
pero también
allocated.
no solo es un tema de financiamiento, sino que
But it's
muchas
not
veces
only
un tema
about
de
funding,
apoyo político.
but it's
Y en
also
ese
a matter
sentido,
of political
los webinars
support.
como estos,
And
donde
in this
podemos
sense,
destacar
webinars
los
like
aspectos
this one,
importantes,
where
hablar
we
sobre los
can
temas,
talk about these
nuestros
issues
webinars
and
son
highlight
abiertos
the
a todo el
important
mundo. Entonces son
factors,
importantes
our
para salir
webinars are
de
open
muchas veces la red
to
de
the whole
especialistas en
world.
la que nos movemos, sino que
So
podamos
the
fluir
purpose of
también
that
más
is to
políticamente
connect
en la toma de
with
decisiones, y es
other
algo
experts
muy
and with the
relevante.
general
Los
public.
países están haciendo un
Countries
esfuerzo
are
por
carrying out
desarrollar
a
programas y
very
contar con sistemas de
big
prevención.
effort to
Y
have
sobre todo algo que
prevention
funciona
efforts
muy bien es la
established,
cooperación
and something that
multilateral
works
y
very well
bilateral también.
is
De hecho,
bilateral
los
and
países nos
multilateral
apoyan a otros
collaboration,
compartiendo
where some
iniciativas,
countries
programas, etc.
support
Eso es
others
lo que tenemos
with
en este
programs and
momento. No como
initiatives.
la
So
Unión
this is what we
Europea, que
have right now.
posee como unos
This is not
fondos
like
que
the
se
European
distribuyen
Union
para
that
lograr
has
unos
certain
objetivos en
funds
todos los
that are
estados de la Unión Europea.
distributed
No, los
for the
estados europeos,
purposes
dijimos,
of the European Union.
se
In our
organizan de
state,
manera
however,
diferente y tenemos este foro
is
político que es
different.
la OEA.
And we have this political forum in OAS, which is
Muchas gracias,
CICAD.
Jimena. Nos quedan pocos minutos,
Thank you
entonces
very much, Jimena, for that
nos estamos
answer.
despidiendo
We
de
will now
ustedes.
start wrapping up.
Vamos a poner ahorita en
We will now show
chat
in the chat
el video de YouTube de la grabación donde pueden
the
acceder después
YouTube
a
video of the recording of
la
this
conversación,
session.
perdón, el webinar. José Luis, si me puedes ayudar, por favor.
José Luis, if you can help me with that, because I am not finding it for some reason. Sorry about that. Thank you very much to our panelists, Carmen, Nicolás, and Drusilla. Thank you so much for this very rich webinar of information and experiences. Thank you to all of the participants who joined today with your very interesting questions. And we hope to see you soon in future webinars. And whatever question you have, please contact directly our panelists. Thank you very much and have a great rest of your day.
Gracias.
Gracias, muchas gracias.